Welcome to Glow. I'm Tiffany Cruikshank, and this class is a foundational class for anyone who's new to Yin. So we'll go over some of the principles and I'll guide you through. Just make sure that you have either a blanket or a large towel. Props are really helpful in a Yin class, so if you have other things around that you like to have near you in case, that's always nice to have. A couple of things to keep in mind as we go through this. Yin practices can be used for flexibility or range of motion, but one of the, I think, more valuable things we're looking at with a Yin practice is really working into the health of the connective tissue and reestablishing the kind of resilience and elasticity of the connective tissue. So as we work into these, what's helpful to keep in mind is that if you think of 100% being the greatest stretch that you could come into without hurting the tissues, we want to stay more at like the 60%. So what we want to have is a little bit of sensation, but we're not necessarily looking for a big stretch. What this is doing is also targeting the connective tissue to press out the fluid in the connective tissue, which research shows us that as we take that stretch off the tissue, that it pulls more fluid into it afterwards, not just right away, but for several hours after. So we're trying to hydrate and rejuvenate the resilience of these tissues by going into a really low intensity. So you're just going until you feel a little sensation, but not a lot of stretch. The other thing is that you want to set yourself up so that you can relax, so that ideally we can relax the muscles as much as possible to be more specific to the fascia or the connective tissue around them. Now that we learn more about the importance of connective tissue, we know how valuable it is for the health of the tissues, the communication of the nervous system, as well as how we move and orient through space. So if you're new to Yin, I recommend just backing off a little bit on the intensity, making sure you have a way to support yourself so you can relax. And then what we want to do is just be still there. So I'll guide you through all of that and give you some options along the way. We'll start with a little bit of simple movement to help kind of calm the nervous system and work into that sense of ease. So if you come into tabletop to begin with, we're just going to inhale and extend the spine and look up. And then slow down the exhale and just start by tucking the tailbone, starting to round the spine as you lean back. Let that rounding of the spine move up the spine, so that eventually the head drops and you're in some semblance of child's pose. On your inhale, come back up, right up and extend the spine. And then again, slow down the exhale, tuck the tailbone, round the spine and let it move up through the spine there so that the head drops last. Inhale, come back up. And then repeating and slowing down the movement on the exhale. Pausing at the bottom if you're out of breath there and you're comfortable. Inhale, extend. Do two more there. Slowing down your exhale. Pausing for a moment to rest. One more as you exhale, rounding and leaning back. This time, pause in child's pose and allow yourself to be still. And notice what it feels like to drop into that stillness. Notice that there might be days where that feels more welcoming or more challenging. And just notice. On your inhale, come on up and we'll come into our first Yin posture here. Come into a comfortable seat and just spread your legs loosely apart. This doesn't need to be far. You're going to grab your blanket or your towel and you're going to decide if your hamstring's a little tighter, you might want to fold it up so that you have a greater lift here. But what you're going to do is you're going to sit right on the edge of that blanket because the blanket's going to help tilt your pelvis forward. So that what we're trying to avoid here is this position, so that the pelvis is more upright. And from there, we can safely hinge forward and drape the spine and the chest forward from there. So we're trying to avoid this kind of shape here. So if you're having trouble doing that, you'll just stay in this more upright position, sitting on the edge of the blanket there to help you do that. So I'm sitting upright, using the hands behind you. And a great way to test this one is to see if you can keep that length in the spine and just lift your hands up off the ground a little. So if you notice that as you lift your hands up off the ground, you sink back, Your best variation is probably going to be just to stay right here with the hands on the floor, which is a great variation to stay with. If you're able to lift the hands and stay there, maybe try replacing the hands in front of you and then tipping the pelvis forward a little bit and letting the spine start to drape forward. Now again, we're going just to this 60%. So even if you're really flexible here and able to lay really far down in the stretch, I recommend just going slowly, letting the spine round, and noticing if you can go slow enough to notice where that more subtle sensation develops. Now, because we're trying not to use the muscles, you want the legs to be relaxed. So you might even kind of shake them out there a little bit. Notice that the legs are relaxed. They're going to fall open. And then find a position with your arms to support you so that you can relax your shoulders here and kind of lean in. And if it's comfortable for you, you can drop the head and tuck the chin. Trying to find a way to set yourself up. Now, this might feel very different than how you normally come into these poses, and it should feel very different than the variations we're taking in a hatha or vinyasa practice where we're coming deeper into our range of motion. But we're trying to target this activation of the connective tissue at that 60% of our stretch to allow the muscles to relax, to allow that gentle tug on the connective tissue, which not only encases every muscle in the body, but also penetrates through the tissues of the muscle. So it's this kind of casing and support, a layer that also is really important for communication with the nervous system, with the tissues. So then as you stay there, see if you can allow yourself to be still and just notice that tendency to want to move around. And notice what happens if you're able to just be still and not move around. What happens both in the physical body as well as that awareness of the mind settling in. Perhaps you notice how the body adapts to that stillness. Feel the muscles through the legs soften. Feel the muscles through the back soften. A great one for people who sit at a computer a lot because these muscles work so hard to hold us up. A nice way to stimulate those tissues to the back of the body to rehydrate, to rejuvenate these hardworking tissues, postural tissues. Take a deep breath there. And then with as little effort as possible, just slowly start to walk your hands in. It's kind of a lazy walking. And then remove whatever you're sitting on and start to lie back, bending your knees and maybe resting your knees toward each other. And take a moment to feel that reaction through the back of the body. Notice what happens as you're able to relax in that yin posture, what happens as an effect here. Perhaps you can sense that circulation of fluids back into the connective tissue, picturing them like a sponge as you stretch them, pressing fluid out. Now as you release that, soaking up the surrounding fluids, making these tissues really resilient as that water allows them to be more resistant to compression. But most importantly, just notice the sensations and the textures as you allow your body to drop into the ground. And then with as little effort as possible, just gently roll onto your side. Use your arms to press you up. And we're going to come into a seated twist, known as Ardha Matsyendrasana. We're going to take the right leg on top and take the left leg underneath. Now, again, a really nice one to have this blanket for all of these seated postures and most of your yin practices. Feel free to grab that and sit on it, but make sure you're sitting right on the edge, because the idea is that it's helping to tip the pelvis forward so the spine can more easily sit upright. Really helpful if you're tight in the hips or the hamstrings. So I'm sitting right on the edge of the blanket. My right foot's going to be on the floor, and my left foot is kind of out from underneath me a little bit off to the side. I'm just going to loosely grab a hold of my right knee with my left hand and take my right hand to the floor behind me. Then I'm going to drop my sitting bones down. Inhale, lift up through the chest and the spine. And then just keep that length as I just twist over to my right. So you might want to hook the elbow around the knee there. Now this is a little bit more upright pose, but I do want to try and stay in it with the least amount of effort as possible. So I'm just coming into a gentle twist. It's, again, not necessarily the deepest I can go, but more at that like 60%, where I feel a little bit of sensation, but not a lot of stretch. Gently rinsing out these connective tissues, fascia, also a little compression to the organs and the belly. Nice little rejuvenator here. Once you're there, maybe soften the eyes. And let your attention turn into this inner world of sensation under the skin. Notice the movement of the breath. Notice the texture of sensations up through the spine. Across the chest. Through the hips. And just allow yourself to be an observer rather than needing to change. Notice how the tissues respond to the stillness. The cool thing about the fascia is that it also has the capacity to kind of reshape in response to these positions that we can hold for a sustained period of time, maybe a couple of minutes or so. Has this slow contractile capacity, different than a muscle. It's happening very slowly, but allowing it to adapt. Just sensing those tissue changes. Another couple breaths here. And on your inhale, slowly just release the twist and find a comfortable seat for a moment before we do the second side. And just allow yourself to notice the difference between the two sides, which should be a little more vivid since we've only done one side. Notice the difference in the awareness along the left side of the spine in comparison to the right side of the spine. Maybe one area just feels more pronounced, or more awake, or warm, maybe pulsing, maybe relaxed. Whatever you notice there, it doesn't even need to have words. I'm going to open your eyes and we're going to switch sides. Take the left leg on top this time. So the sole of the foot is close to the floor. That right foot is just a little bit out from underneath you so it's not tilting the pelvis there. And I want to try and sit on the edge of that blanket or towel. I'm going to sit upright here, grab a hold of the knee with the right hand, and take the left hand to the floor or the blanket behind you. Drop the sitting bones there. And then inhale, sit up nice and tall. Keep that as you just gently twist to the left. And then if it feels more comfortable, you can hook the elbow around the knee. Again, you're just at that 60%, so a really different position than these poses we come into in our hatha or vinyasa practices. So sometimes it's helpful to think of them as different poses. 60%, and then soften or close the eyes. And just allow yourself to commit to just being still here. Noticing how the tissues respond to that stillness. Maybe there's even a restlessness there. If you practice yin enough, you'll definitely notice times when you come to your mat where you feel a little restless. And in my experience, it's helpful just to acknowledge that and be okay with it. Notice what happens if you can be still anyways, without forcing it to soften, but just allowing the restlessness to exist in the stillness. And watching to see if anything changes without expecting it. Without expecting or needing anything to change. To just notice. Just take a couple more breaths there. And then on your inhale, slowly release the twist. Again, find a comfortable seat there and pause to notice. Notice first what feels different from side to side, specifically along the sides of the spine. Then also notice what feels more similar side to side now, between this time and the last time you were here, between sides. We're going to do one more seated pose before we come onto our back. The rest will be on our back. And we're going to stay on the edge of the blanket here and take the soles of the feet together. Now, if you like, if your knees are really high and that feels uncomfortable to you, if you have some pillows or blocks or anything you want to put underneath your thighs to support them, sometimes it can make it more accessible so you can relax. For some people, even though their knees are high, they're able to relax, and that feels okay. The most important thing is that you want to be able to set yourself up and relax. My hips have always been like this, so everyone's hips are a little bit different. Yours may not look anything like this, but try and relax your knees down. Try and relax through the legs and the feet here. There's a sense of doing nothing. And then again, sit up nice and tall and notice as you take the hands away if this happens again. And if so, your pose is right here the whole time. Just stay there, and you'll feel that already probably through the hips. If you want a little bit more, you can start to lean forward and let the spine drape forward, stimulating that tissue all the way up through the back as well as the hips, and maybe drop the chin. So similar to our first pose with the legs wide, find a position with your arms where you can kind of lean into it. And this is helpful because your arms will be like the brake on the pose here, so you don't need to worry about going deeper and deeper and deeper. But we'll stay at that 60% of our full capacity for stretch. And if you're rounding forward and dropping the head, you might feel that gentle tug both through the hips and legs and all the way up through the back and the neck. But notice what you feel. Notice it might be different each time you come to this pose. as a reflection of our lives, of where we are that day, maybe even of what we need. And see if you can allow yourself to just rest in the stillness. Give up the need to hold yourself or support yourself. And sense that very deep letting go. Allowing the tissues to release and really take in this nourishment of the stillness, both through the tissues themselves and the fascia, as well as the nervous system. And since this might be your first class or might be new to yin, notice too as things progress. As you come back to some of these poses, you might explore, there's a lot of prop variations we can use. If you had a block, sometimes people like a block under their forehead or their head. Notice that every body is different, and each time you come to your mat, you might want different props to support you. Your knees or your head, your pelvis. But to find a position you can be content in. Take a deep breath. As lazy as possible, use your arms to just gently creep the hands back in if you're folding forward. And then use your hands to bring your knees together. Scoot off of your blanket and come onto your back. Pause there with your knees bent again. Rest your knees toward each other. And again, take a moment to check in. The noticing is also a really important part of the recalibration of the nervous system and the tissues. This moment between the poses, we can just sense changes in circulation or sensations. And we're going to come into the next one by straightening the legs here. And this is a really small movement, so don't underestimate the power of just a little movement here. We're just going to walk the feet just a few inches to the left. And if it's comfortable there, you can hook the right ankle on top of the left. Sometimes it just kind of helps to hold you in place there. So from this starting point, everything else stays the same. I'm just walking my feet only just a few inches to the left. That might even just be 1 inch. And then I'm going to take my arms up overhead and walk my arms and my torso over to the left. So my hips stay put. Now find a comfortable place there because we are going to stay. And the intensity on this one can develop a little bit as you stay still. So just let it be very gentle. Again, 60% of your full capacity for stretch. Your elbows can bend. If this feels like it's too much on your shoulders or your arms, feel free to let go of the wrist or take your arms by your sides. But find a position where you can drop the back of your skull into your mat. And what you want to feel here is just a gentle tug somewhere through the tissue on the right side of the body. So that might be more through the armpit or the ribs, the waist or the hip, or the outer leg, or maybe several of those areas. If you're comfortable there, soften or close your eyes. And as you start to build a relationship with this stillness, notice that it might be starting to draw you in a little deeper. Noticing the space within the stillness. You can soften any need to do. Allow yourself just to be here. Take a deep breath there. And just go really slow. Just start to release the hands if you have interlaced them. Slowly start to creep the arms and the torso back to center. Then unhook the ankles and bring the legs back to center. Take a moment there. The arms can still be up if you like, or you can take them down along your sides for a moment. And notice that awareness through the right side of the body in comparison to the left. Noticing what stands out, and if you're not feeling anything really significant there, notice if one side feels lighter or heavier, warmer or cooler. Maybe there's more of a subtle difference between the two. We'll come into the other side, start to walk the feet over to the right just a few inches and draw the left ankle on top of the right if you did for the first side. Take your arms up overhead and then walk the arms and the rib cage and head over to the right a little bit. Keeping the hips where they began. Notice that both sides of my pelvis are even somewhat. I'm not trying to make that happen. It's just that I haven't shifted so far into the pose that I've lost that neutral position in my pelvis. So it's more just a matter of how far I go over to the right to maintain that. So again, let it just be a little movement of legs and arms to the right. Drop the back of your head into the floor. And if you want to, again, you can hold onto the hands. You can let the elbows bend. If it's too much, arms overhead, you can bend them out to the sides or take them down alongside you. Most importantly, find a position you can drop into. Close or soften your eyes. Allow yourself to lean into the stillness, regardless of what you find there. Noticing that you've adjusted the pose to just be really mild intensity of stretch or sensation there. So we're gently stimulating these connective tissues. And down, regulating the nervous system. Notice what you meet in the silence. Maybe that's a busy mind. Maybe that's a quiet mind. And then just gently start to creep back to center. Bring your arms along your sides. Again, take a moment to notice. And just slowly start to bend your knees. I'm going to have you take your blanket over to your left side or your towel. Take your knees just loosely in towards your chest, not really close. And then just gently start to take your knees over to your left and set them on your blanket there. And notice if that is not enough support to make you feel really relaxed in your twist, you can fold up that blanket even more and rest it under your knees. And then I'm going to take my arms over to the sides. Now, that blanket for some people feels, depending on your body, more comfortable under the knees. Some people like it a little bit better between the knees. But find a place that you can use that blanket to support you so that you can really relax. So maybe a little further in, maybe just between the knees barely. And then let your arms spread out to the sides and decide if you want them bent or straight, what feels more comfortable to you to relax. And again, we're looking for this 60% intensity. So it's not a specific number as much as this place where there's a gentle sensation that I can relax into. So feel all the contact points with your body on the floor, the back of your head, the back of your arms, the side of your torso and hip and leg. And feel all of those contact points start to lean into the floor. Maybe that means your right leg pulls away from the blanket, and that's okay as long as you're able to relax still. Feel those contact points of your body on the floor, leaning in. Notice the space perhaps that creates for your body to soften a little more. Remembering that less is often more here as we gauge that intensity to really be specific. These intelligent connective tissue layers, this resilient connective tissue. Just needs a little boost from time to time. Again, notice how your relationship to the stillness changes without any reference to whether that's good or bad. Noticing how your body responds to the stillness here. Perhaps as you maybe even set yourself up better to relax. Take a deep breath there. little effort as possible. Just start to take the blanket out from between the knees or under them. Just gently start to rock back to center. Pause there. Notice any sensations that stand out through that right side as a reminder of the resilience of this tissue, its capacity to adapt and recalibrate. We'll come into the second side. So grab your blanket or your towel first and just set it over to the right. Loosely draw your knees in toward your chest. And then just slowly start to take the knees over to the side. And ideally set yourself up similar to the position you had on the first side. So a blanket either under the knees or between the knees, maybe between the knees, maybe more between the inner thighs. Most importantly, find what's comfortable for you. Then stretch the arms out in a similar position. And just take a moment to check in and notice that you've found a way to support yourself to relax. And that might be shifting your prop or rolling up the blanket thicker or moving your knees down a little or finding a different position of your arms. And then slowly starting to settle into that stillness. Feel the back of your head drop into the floor. And again, take a moment to notice all of the contact points with your body on the ground. The head, back of the arms, side of the torso, the hip, and the leg. And feel all of those contact points starting to lean into the floor. Notice the space that it creates for the rest of the body to relax. Notice that gentle ebb and flow of the breath, effortless. Each exhalation guiding you a little deeper into that relaxation. So you allow the breath to do the work for you, to help you relax. Effortless breath. Feel your bones drop into the floor. And just take a few more moments here to let it sink into the tissues. Take a deep breath there. And if you've got the blanket between your knees, just gently press it out from between the knees, move it away. With as little effort as possible, just gently start to rock onto your back. Place the feet on the floor, arms along your sides. Again, take a moment to notice. In particular, notice the awareness through the left side of the body in contrast to the right. Maybe that's temperature differences, one side feeling warmer or cooler. Maybe that's pressure, fullness, anything else you notice. And this last one, it's going to take us into Shavasana. So if you just rock up and grab your blanket, or your towel, open it up, and you just want to have a little roll that's like a couple inches in diameter. So depending on the size of your towel or your blanket, you're going to lie across it with that blanket right in the mid-back. For women, it'll be kind of right where the bra strap is. But you want to make sure that whatever you're lying on here, as you drop back, you can easily let the neck and shoulders fall into the floor and feel supported. So if you're feeling like the shoulders are off the floor and the neck is kind of really leaning backwards a lot, like so, then just sit up and make that roll a little smaller. So it's just a tiny little roll right behind the mid-back. And if you have a lot of extra behind the head there, maybe you want to roll it up behind your neck. Find a comfortable position with just a tiny little extension through the upper back, through the mid-back. And then decide where you want the arms. It will be kind of strange to have them along the sides normally because they'll be on your blanket, but maybe straight out to the sides like a T, or maybe up a little higher, like a cactus with the elbows bent. Find what allows you to relax the arms the most. And then sense that you've put yourself in a position here where you can let your head drop back. Feel the back of your skull drop into the floor or your blanket. And see if you can allow yourself to drop right into the stillness. Imagining this as the beginning of your Shavasana. And know that if you like to have something under your knees, you could always grab that if there's maybe pressure in the lower back or preference for something under your knees. Now's a good time to grab it. Once you've got everything, allow yourself to lean into the stillness. Feel the part of your back resting on top of that roll, dropping into the support of the roll, trusting in the support of the roll, allowing the rest of the body just to drape over the roll and fall into the ground. Mm, If you have a little extra time, you might want to even just stay there for another minute or two if you're really enjoying the stillness. Otherwise, just roll off to the side enough to remove your blanket and lie flat. Our whole yin practice is like one large shavasana as you get comfortable with the postures and the stillness more and more. Really nice and luxurious to be able to spend some extra time in Shavasana here if you have time today. Feel free to stay as long as you like. But most importantly, when you do decide to come out, allow yourself to move slowly so that as you sneak back into your day, you can take this awareness of ease, mindfulness in the body with you. I hope you enjoy. I hope it's been helpful. Namaste.